The idea of feeling like you have to prove yourself as an athlete is something that's come up in a lot of different coaching calls recently. And this past week, it seems like it's come up in one at least every single day. And so what I mean by this is the idea that you feel like you need to prove yourself to your teammates, to your coaches, or even to yourself. And how this feeling of needing to prove yourself can actually cause you to play with more tension and underperform. So let's take the example of a college basketball player. Let's say that this college basketball player is extremely worried about proving himself to his coach because he wants to make sure that he gets the starting role and he holds on to that starting role. And so what ends up happening is that during games, when he gets to go out there, he is playing with a lot of tension. He is playing very scared, and he is playing in a very self-conscious way because he's not allowing himself to just play freely since he's feeling this need to prove himself to his coach. So what ends up happening is that his shots are not taken with as much fluidity. He's not calling for the ball as much. He's not driving to the basket as much as he would like, all due to this underlying feeling of I need to prove myself to my coach. Now, hold on a second, because if you feel like you want to prove yourself to your coach, shouldn't that lead to you going out there and playing more aggressively and trying to do more on the court? That's the idea in theory, right? But when this idea of wanting to prove yourself becomes hurtful, it's typically because you're wanting to prove yourself so much that turns into the fear of what if I don't prove myself? What if coach thinks less of me? What if coach gets mad at me? What if I make a lot of mistakes and I embarrass myself in front of my teammates and so on? So when we see this need to prove yourself become hurtful, it's because, you're scared of not proving yourself more than you just want to prove yourself. So going back to that example, this basketball player is holding himself back, not playing the way he would like. All of this boils down to him wanting to prove to his coach that he's good enough to play and good enough to hold on to a starting role, but really it's just creating too much tension, and he's trying to force that instead of just allowing it to happen naturally due to his talents. Another way that we can see this happen is actually during practice, where you're trying to prove yourself to your coach or to your teammates during practice. So once again, you're focusing so much on wanting to show them how good you are that you try to force that, which creates more anxiety, more tension, and you're trying to control the result rather than just simply playing. So what can we do about this if you do feel the need to prove yourself to coach, teammates, or whomever it might be? Well, I think we have to recognize that the need to prove yourself comes from a feeling of not being good enough right now. So whenever I'm working with a player and we're talking about why they're trying to prove to their coaches or to their teammates that they're good enough, we take that conversation a little bit deeper and we start to discuss why they don't feel good enough right now. Because if you honestly feel good enough in your skills, you don't have this need to prove yourself to your coach. You just trust that you will prove yourself to your coach because you're good enough to do so. And you don't feel the need to force yourself to play well. You trust that you will play well. And then coach playing you, your teammates thinking that you're a good player, other people thinking you're a good player, all of that happens naturally as a byproduct of you simply playing because you have that level of trust. So it's not necessarily about us not trying to prove ourselves to other people. It's more about us trying to have more trust in ourselves and believe that we are good enough right now in order to prove ourselves to other people, because I find it very difficult to completely get rid of that desire to prove yourself to your coach, your teammates, your parents, the fans, whoever it might be, because, as an athlete, you want other people to think you're good. But we just can't get caught up in trying to force other people to think we're good and force ourselves to play a way that's going to make other people think that we're a good enough player. So something I always suggest is that we want to change our approach. So instead of having our approach be that we want to prove ourselves to other people, we want to change our approach to improving for ourselves. And this is going to work on building that trust and that belief that I was just referring to that is so critical to helping us stop trying to, feel this need to prove ourselves to other people. And so what I mean by trying to improve instead of trying to prove is that if you're in practice and you find yourself trying to prove yourself to your coach, let's say, you need to switch that and you need to focus on what are you trying to do to get better. And I was talking to a baseball player yesterday who's coming up on tryouts for his varsity team this spring, and so he and I were discussing the practices that he's doing right now with his team and with his coach as part of a preseason practice process. And he was telling me about how he feels the need to prove to his coach that he's good when he's throwing bullpens. And so then we were discussing that if he's throwing bullpens, he needs to be focused on what he's improving that day instead of feeling like every day is a performance. Because the truth is, coaches want to see that you are getting better. They want to see that you're improving. They don't necessarily need you to be perfect today. They need you to work on improving. They need you to be coachable. But when we're so caught up in trying to prove ourselves to coach, we get this feeling of needing to be perfect today instead of focusing on what we actually need to do to get better. So not only does the need to prove yourself to your coach or to your teammates hold you back during games, but it also inhibits improvement. Because instead of focusing on those small details we need to be focusing on today to get better, we're focusing on what does coach think of me? What do my teammates think of me? Are they thinking that I'm good? Am I doing good enough today in practice? So that's the first part of this improving mindset. During practice, you want to make sure that you're actually focusing on getting better and you're focusing on those small details instead of focusing on performing in front of your coaches or performing in front of your teammates. Now, when we transfer this from practices to games, it's a little bit more difficult, in all honesty, to hold on to that improving mindset, but we can still do it. We can still say, okay, today I want to go out there in the game and I want to try to improve a little bit. And then we decide, well, what is it that I want to improve upon? So going back to that basketball player example I gave earlier, one of the things that he could potentially work on is he could say that I want to improve my ability to drive to the basket. So I want to improve having the confidence to drive to the basket. That's it, right? I'm not even going to worry about improving my finishing at the rim. I just want to improve driving to the basket. Or maybe he says that he wants to improve being confident with his shot. So he takes shots and he trusts himself to take his shots. So he's going to try to improve upon something during that game. We don't want to feel like we need to be perfect. The need to be perfect follows this feeling of needing to prove yourself, because if you're perfect, you feel like you will naturally prove yourself. But again, the need to be perfect, just like the need to prove yourself to your coaches or your teammates, leads to tension, leads to fear, and leads to underperforming. So we know that at the core, all of us as athletes, we want to prove ourselves to other people. We want other people to think we're good, but we have to recognize that need to have other people think we're good holds us back from improving in practice and holds us back from performing freely during games. And it also comes from a lack of trust and belief in ourselves. Because if we really believe in ourselves, we don't feel this need to prove ourselves to others because we trust that we will naturally prove ourselves to others. This is not at all an easy thing to do. It's not easy to get past that feeling like you need to prove yourself. But what I find is a really great first step is to make sure that you're focusing on improving during practice, and then pick just one or two things that you want to improve upon during the game. And then as you improve upon those, you will be developing this confidence and belief within yourself. As you develop this confidence and belief, you won't worry so much about proving yourself to other people because you know that you're good enough to do so. Now, if you'd like me to make some more videos on specific topics or specific situations in terms of this idea of proving yourself, because I know that it is a pretty tough thing to work on as an athlete, please let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training. And if you're interested in any of the sports psychology programs I have available, I put links to those in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.